Howdy and welcome back to Wild West Deep Dives. This week, we are going to talk about the Battle of Cieneguilla. Along the trail between Santa Fe and Taos and the New Mexico Territory in 1854, Chief Chacon's large contingent of Jicarilla Apaches engaged in a fierce battle against the United States Dragoons under the command of Lieutenant John W. Davidson. The Santa Fe Weekly Gazette would report one of the severest battles that ever took place between American troops and Red Indians. Well, let's get into it, shall we? My name's Steven, and welcome to Wild West Deep Dives. In the decade leading up to 1854, the Jicarilla rarely ventured into what is now known as the state of Colorado, and Meriwether's predecessor as governor, William Carr Lane, sought to restrict them to the territories west of the Rio Grande. At that time, military officials viewed the Jicarilla as the most problematic among the 6 Apache factions. Yet Governor Meriwether, who also served as ex officio superintendent of Indian affairs for the territory, understood that the Native Americans were often in dire need of food, a situation he could not improve due to financial constraints. He did not coddle the Indians, a trait he attributed to Lane. With likely good intentions, Governor Lane had provided some supplies without official consent, hoping that the Senate would endorse his agreements with the tribes. When the expected approval did not come, however, the Indians faced significant disappointment, prompting Governor Meriwether to use some of his own money to offer assistance in an attempt to maintain good relations. Officials in New Mexico were worried about the Jicarilla Apache, not just because of their attacks on settlers, but also due to their location near both the Cimarron Cutoff and the mountain branch of the Santa Fe Trail. In July 1850, Colonel George A. McCall, the Inspector General of the United States Army, noted that their trail intersected the Independence and Santa Fe Road between the Point of Rocks and the Wagon Mound, or Santa Clara Spring. Later, in November, Indian agent James S. Calhoun referred to the area as, quote, that part of the Santa Fe Road which crosses the Rio Colorado. The Jicarilla's presence there was always a threat. Before we get too far, let's give a history of the Jicarilla Apache. I reached out to the Jicarilla Apache themselves for their creation story because the ones I found online weren't from the Jicarilla themselves. I found a video on YouTube that was told by the Jicarilla members, but it was hard to put into print. I didn't ask permission to use their name, but a member responded to my emails and gave me a bunch of information that I could use, and they were a huge help, so I really appreciate them taking the time to help me out. They directed me to use the book, Myths and Tales of the Jicarilla Apache, by Morris E. Opler, saying that they use this as their unofficial guide for their creation story. Now, disclosure, they do have multiple versions of it, and I will just be giving the first one. But if you want to know them all, check out his book. It is definitely worth a read. Just a heads up, it's a long one. Here we go. In the beginning, nothing was here where the world now stands. There was no ground, no earth, nothing but darkness, water, and cyclone. There were no people living. Only the Haitian existed. It was a lonely place. There were no fishes, no living things. All the Haitian were here from the beginning. They had the material out of which everything was created. They made the world first, the earth, the underworld, and then they made the sky. They made earth in the form of a living woman and called her mother. They made sky in the form of a man and called him father. He faces downward and the woman faces up. He is our father and the woman is our mother. In the beginning there were all kinds of Haitian living in the underworld, in the place from which the emergence started. The mountains had a Haitian. The different kinds of fruits each had one. Everything had a Haitian. It was then that the Jicarilla Apache dwelt under the earth. Where they were, there was no light, nothing but darkness. Everything was perfectly spiritual and holy, just like a Haitian. Everything there was as in a dream. The people were not real. They were not flesh and blood. They were like shadows of things at first. The most powerful Haitian down there was Black Haitian. The Haitian were all there already, but in the darkness, Black Haitian was the leader. It was there, before anything else was made, that Black Haitian made all the animals. We dwelt for many years there. It was not a few minutes or a few days, but we do not know how long it was. This is how animals and men first came to be made. Black Haitian first tried to make an animal. He made it with 4 legs of clay and put a tail on it. He looked at it. He said, "It looks rather peculiar." Then he spoke to the mud image. "Let me see how you are going to walk with those 4 feet." This is why little children always like to play with clay images. Then it began to walk. "That's pretty good," said Black Haitian. "I think I can use you in a beneficial way." He spoke to the image. "You have no help. You are all alone. I think I will make it so that you have others from your body." Then all sorts of animals came out from that same body. Black Haitian had the power. He could do anything. Now there were all kinds of animals. Black Haitian stood and looked. He laughed to see all these kinds of animals. He just couldn't help it when he saw all those animals with all their different habits. This is why people laugh today at the habits of animals. They see a hog and laugh at it, saying, "See that dirty animal lying in the mud." All animals were there, some with horns, like the deer and elk, some with big horns, like the mountain sheep. All were present, but at that time, all animals could speak, and they spoke the Jicarilla Apache language. And those animals spoke to Black Haitian. Each one came to speak to him. They asked him many questions. Each asked him what he should eat and where he should go to live, and questions of that order. The Haitian spoke to them. He divided all foods among them. To the horse, sheep, and cow, he gave grass. "This is what you shall eat," he said. To some, he gave brush. To some, pine needles. Some he told to eat certain kinds of leaves, but no grass. "Now you can spread all over the country," he told them. "Go to your appointed places, and then come back, and tell me where you want to stay all your lives." He sent some to the mountains, some to the desert, and some to the plains. That is why you find the animals in different places now. The animals went out and chose their places then. So you find the bear in the mountains, and other animals in different types of country. Haitian said, "It is well. It looks well to see you in places you have chosen." So the animals were set apart. Then Black Haitian held out his hand and asked for water to come to his hand. A drop of rain fell into his palm. He mixed it with the earth, and it became mud. Then he fashioned a bird from the mud. He made the head, body, wings, and 2 legs. He spoke in the same way to the image he had made. "Let me see how you are going to use those wings to fly," he said. He didn't know whether he would like it. Then the mud turned into a bird. It flew around. Black Haitian liked it. "Oh, that is fine," he said. He enjoyed seeing the difference between this one and the ones with 4 legs. "I think you need companions and someone to help you. By yourself alone, you will never be satisfied. From your body there will come others with wings." When Haitian said this, the bird became lonesome. He flew to the east, south, west, and north, and came back saying, "I can find no one to help me." The Haitian took the bird and whirled it around rapidly in a clockwise direction. The bird grew dizzy, and, as one does when he is dizzy, this bird saw many images around. He saw all kinds of birds there, eagles, hawks, and small birds too. He could hardly believe his sight, but when he saw himself again, there were really all kinds of birds there. And because Black Haitian turned the bird around and made him dizzy, birds now circle when they rise in the air. All different kinds of birds were there now. Birds like the air, dwell high, and seldom light on the ground because that drop of water, which became the mud from which the first bird was made, fell from the sky. Then the birds came to Black Haitian. "What shall we eat? Where shall we dwell? Where shall we rest?" they asked. He sent them in all different directions. "Find the place you like best and tell me about it," he said. The birds flew in all directions. All came back. Each one told him the place it liked. "That is all right," Black Haitian told each of them. "You may have that place for your home." Then they asked about food. Black Haitian held his hand up to the east, south, west, and north in turn. And because he had so much power, all kinds of seeds fell into his hand. He scattered the seeds before them. "All right, now pick them up," he said. The birds went to do it, but the seeds turned into worms, grasshoppers, and all insects. The Haitian was trying to tease them. They couldn't catch them at first. Then Black Haitian said, "Oh, it's hard work to catch those flies and grasshoppers. You can do it though." Then they all chased the grasshoppers and other insects around. That is why many birds today use the insects for food and chase the grasshoppers around. At the time, when Black Haitian threw the seeds down, he said to Turkey, You must be the one who takes charge of all these seeds. That is why Turkey has control of the crops now. This is why some of these Indians, and the white people too, use the turkey at Thanksgiving. The white people put the turkey in the middle of the table and have the fruits and vegetables all around it. The Indians use the turkey feathers too. When they plant a crop, they put one turkey feather in each corner of the field. The turkey is striped just like corn. The head is like the corn tassel. Every part of the turkey's body stands for some part of the corn plant. There was a river nearby. You must drink from that river, Black Haitian told him. The birds thought that was a beautiful place. Now I'm going to make something to scare you, Black Haitian said. He was always teasing them. He picked up some moss and began to roll it between his hands. Then he threw it into the water, and it became frogs, fish, and all that life in the water. That is why often, when the birds come to drink water, something sticks its nose out of the water and frightens them, and they jump back. Sometimes even humans are frightened in this way. While the birds were flying around, some of their feathers fell out and into the water, and these turned to water birds, such as the duck, heron, sandhill crane, and others. Now the birds and animals had everything, food and a place to stay and rest. Black Haitian started to make more images of animals and birds. The ones who were already made called a council and came together. The birds and animals were together at this council, for they all spoke the same language in those days. Now what are we to do? They asked Black Haitian. We need a companion. We need man. What do you mean? Asked Black Haitian. Why do you need another companion? The birds and animals said, You are not going to be with us all the time. You will go elsewhere some of the time. I guess that's true. Perhaps someday I'll go away to a place where no one will see me. So all the birds and animals gathered all different objects. Pollen, specular iron ore, water scum, all kinds of pollen, from corn, tule, and the trees. They put these all together. They added red ochre, white clay, white stone, jet, turquoise, redstone, Mexican opal, abalone, and assorted valuable stones. They put all these before Black Haitian. He told them, You must stay a little distance from me. I don't want you to see what I make. He stood to the east, then to the south, then to the west, then to the north. He traced an outline of a figure on the ground, making it just like his own body, for the Haitian was shaped just as we are today. He traced the outline with pollen. The other objects and the precious stones he placed around on the inside, and they became the flesh and bones. The veins were of turquoise, the blood of red ochre, the skin of coral, the bones of white rock, the fingernails were of Mexican opal, the pupil of the eye of jet, the whites of the eyes of abalone, the marrow and the bones of white clay, and the teeth too were Mexican opal. He took a dark cloud and out of it fashioned the hair. It becomes a white cloud when you are old. This was a man which Black Haitian was making, and now the man came to life. He was lying down, face downward, with his arms outstretched. The birds tried to look, but could not make out what it was. Do not look, said Black Haitian. Then the man braced himself, leaning on his arms which were outstretched. Don't look, said Haitian to the birds, who were very much excited now. It was because the animals were so eager to see what Black Haitian was making that people are so curious today, just as you were eager to know this story. Sit up, commanded Black Haitian to the man, and he was sitting up now. This was the third time Black Haitian had spoken to him. Then Black Haitian went over to him, and facing him, picked him up. Now Haitian tried to teach him to speak. Speak to me. Speak, speak, speak. Black Haitian said it 4 times. Then the man spoke. Then Black Haitian said to him 4 times, Laugh, 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 laugh. And the man laughed. Shout, 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 shout. And the man did so. Now Black Haitian was teaching him to walk. Step forward, he said, and made him step with his right foot first, then with his left, then right, and then left again. Now the man could walk. Then Black Haitian said, Run, and he made him run 4 times in a clockwise arc. That is why they have to run a girl's puberty right just like that. When the birds saw what Black Haitian had made, they sang and chirped as though it was early morning. That is why, when the girl who has come of age runs at the time of her puberty ceremony, an old woman stands there and makes that noise in her ear. Now the man could talk, and he understood what the birds were singing, and what Black Haitian was saying, for all had one language then. The man was the only human being living. He was by himself. The birds and animals thought it was not good that he should be by himself, and they all came together and spoke to Black Haitian. Black Haitian asked the birds and animals for some lice. Who has lice? You must bring me some. They brought some. Black Haitian put some on the man's head. He scratched and scratched. Then his eyes became heavy and he went to sleep. He was dreaming and dreaming. He dreamt that someone, a girl, was sitting beside him. He woke up. The dream had come true. A woman was there. He spoke to his wife and she answered. He laughed and she laughed too. He said, "Let us both get up." They both arose. "Let's walk," he told her. Right, left, left. He led her for 4 steps. "Run," he said, and they both ran. Now another person was there. The birds sang and chirped. They wanted to make pleasant music for them so they wouldn't become lonesome. The names of these first two were Ancestral Man and Ancestral Woman. The Jicarilla Apache reside in the southwestern United States, part of the loosely organized autonomous bands of the Eastern Apache. The Jicarilla constructed wickiups, dwellings crafted from reeds or grass on an elliptical framework, and communicated in Eastern Apache language. The term Jicarilla comes from a Spanish word meaning little basket, which refers to the small sealed baskets they use daily. Prior to the arrival of Spanish colonizers, the Apache's territory spanned what is now east central and southern Arizona, southeastern Colorado, much of New Mexico, western Texas, as well as northern Chihuahua and Sonora, Mexico. The ancestral Apache likely did not migrate to the southwest until at least 1100 CE. While the Apache eventually adopted a nomadic lifestyle that heavily depended on horse transport, semi-sedentary Plains Apache farmers were still residing along the Dismal River in present-day Kansas as late as 1700. The convergence of horse and gun trades in the Central Plains around 1750 led to a significant increase in guerrilla-style raiding by previously nomadic groups like the Comanche. Consequently, the remaining Plains Apache faced intense pressure and retreated further south and west. Culturally, the Apache are categorized into 2 main groups: the Eastern Apache, which encompasses the Mescalero, Chiricahua, Lipan, Kiowa Apache, and Jicarilla. In the Western Apache, the Sibique, the Mibreno, Coyotero, and both Northern and Southern Tonto or Mogollon Apache. Other than the Kiowa Apache, who integrated into the Kiowa tribal circle by adopting their loyalty and customs, the Apache traditionally operated without a centralized tribal structure. Instead, the band, a self-governing small group with a specific area, served as the main political and raiding unit. The most prominent headman of a band was informally recognized as his chief, and multiple bands could come together under a single leader. Therefore, chieftainship was a privilege earned through merit rather than inherited. After relocating to the southwest, the Apache established a versatile subsistence economy that involved hunting and gathering wild foods, farming, and acquiring other goods from Pueblo villages through trade, raiding, and livestock hunts. The majority of the Jicarilla engaged in extensive farming, cultivating corn and other vegetables, while also hunting bison extensively. But the Lipan of Texas, which likely was a faction of the Jicarilla, had mostly abandoned farming in favor of a more nomadic lifestyle. Despite being one of the most formidable groups of the colonial frontiers of Mexico and the United States, and likely due to the strong belief in their military capabilities, the Apache initially sought to establish friendly relations with the Spanish, Mexicans, and Americans. However, during the late 17th century, there was a 5-year drought that took over the landscape, and the Apache began raiding Spanish missions. With the inability for the Spanish to safeguard the missionized Pueblo villages, it may have contributed to the outbreak of the Pueblo Rebellion in 1680. In the aftermath, the Spanish retaliated, and many Pueblo people found refuge with the Navajo. My 3 main sources for this episode were pieces written by John Pessoa from American Military University, titled The Battle of Cieneguilla for the Saber and Scroll Journal, Campaigns Against the Jicarilla Apache 1854, written by Morris F. Taylor, and finally, The Final Report of the Battle of Cieneguilla by authors David M. Johnson, Chris Adams, Charles Hark, and Skip Keith Miller. I leaned on them heavily and used it for the bulk of my research. Mr. Pizzella states that the Jicarilla were described as, quote, very poor, very hard to govern, and from their continually roving through the settles, and thereby a danger, and to be apprehended from collisions between them and the citizens. Between 1848 and 1849, there were moments when peace with the Jicarilla seemed possible. But this notion of peace was shattered by an event at a military post in Las Vegas, New Mexico. When warriors arrived at the post to engage in trade, Captain Henry B. Judd, who led a detachment of the 3rd U.S. Artillery Regiment at Las Vegas, grew wary of the Jicarilla's intentions and ordered their capture. A brief skirmish ensued, resulting in the deaths of 4 Jicarilla, which was viewed as an unprovoked assault by them. It was suspected that the nearby settlers were being attacked by both the Ute and Jicarilla warriors. The Jicarilla were never able to unite as a single entity, remaining fragmented due to the dominance of other powerful tribes that roamed the plains. Consequently, the Jicarilla Apaches had no choice but to relocate from the plains to northern New Mexico. As more and more settlers flooded into the area following the United States victory over Mexico in 1848, the Jicarilla were compelled to abandon their traditional hunting grounds in New Mexico. In July 1850, Colonel George McCall conducted a survey of the region inhabited by the Jicarilla, and noted that they were few in number, but had, quote, committed more murders on our people than all others together. In 1850, the Jicarilla engaged in increasingly aggressive behavior by stealing cattle, which compelled the army to intensify their pursuit and impose punishments. By 1851, a portion of the Jicarilla expressed a desire for peace. A treaty was formed by the Jicarilla and the United States government, enabling U.S. officials to gain deeper insights into the Jicarilla people. But as was all too common in the West, the Jicarilla had a limited grasp of the treaty terms. Morris F. Taylor goes deeper into the lead-up of the battle in 1854. He talks about how in the decade prior to 1854, it seems that the Jicarilla did not frequently venture into what is now known as Colorado. The governor of New Mexico Territory from 1852 to 1853, William Carr Lane, sought to restrict the movements of the Jicarilla to areas west of the Rio Grande. At that time, military officials viewed the Jicarilla as the most problematic among the 6 Apache tribes. In the late summer of 1852, a group of Jicarilla joined forces with Navajo and Ute to launch an attack on the Kiowa and Arapaho. On their journey, they conducted raids around the small Greenhorn settlement, located east of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which had seen some white settlers since roughly 1846. This marked an unusual northern appearance for the Jicarilla. During Governor Meriwether's administration, signs of their growing unrest became evident as assistance failed to arrive and food supplies diminished. A Jicarilla Ute contingent, led by Colorado, a Ute leader, ambushed a small group of the United States troops in what is now recognized as Ute Park, close to Old Bali Mountain along the upper reaches of the Cimarron tributary of the Canadian River. The soldiers were likely part of the 1st Dragoons, stationed at Rialto on the Cimarroncito, and among their attackers were the later famous Ouray, whose mother was Jicarilla and Chacon, a prominent Jicarilla chief. Such military disturbances in the New Mexico Department were closely monitored, particularly by the successive combatants at Fort Union, established in 1851, that was situated near the eastern boundary of the Jicarilla Territory. These officers, due to the fort's strategic location at the intersection of the Cimarron Cutoff and the mountain branch along the Santa Fe Trail, were primarily concerned with ensuring the safety of travel and communication. This concern naturally involved interactions with several Plains tribes, predominantly the Kiowa and Comanche, in addition to the Jicarilla Apache and their Ute allies. Lieutenant Colonel Philip St. George Cook was in charge at Fort Union when a report arrived about an Indian raid on cattle owned by Samuel B. Watrous, who supplied beef to the troops. Cook's orders to Second Lieutenant David Bell indicate that there was uncertainty regarding whether the raid should be attributed to the Jicarilla or the Ute troops. Bell took 35 men, a platoon, from Company H, 2nd Dragoons, equipped with 15 days' worth of rations, and instructed to scout beyond and along the Canadian River up to the Cinto Mountain. Brevet Captain George Skies and the 2nd Dragoons and 2nd Lieutenant Joseph E. Maxwell from the 3rd Infantry joined this small group of volunteers. They departed the post on the morning of the 2nd of March. 3 days later, their guide, whose name cannot be identified, discovered a fresh trail that he claimed belonged to an Apache hunting party. Shortly after, they spotted several Indians galloping hard on the opposite side of a rocky ravine. After crossing over, the troops captured a solitary Apache and took him prisoner. While he was expressing friendship, they noticed the main group of Apache warriors retreating in the distance, roughly 3/4 of a mile away. Leaving the captured Apache under guard, Bell and his men charged after them. They reached the top of the hill and encountered Apache warriors charging towards them at full speed, their bowstrings drawn and shields raised, ready for combat. The warriors halted about 150 paces away, and their leader engaged in elaborate movements, creating irregular curves, beating his shield, striking dramatic poses, and shouting wildly. Lieutenant Bell addressed the Indian in Spanish, indicating that the white men wished to speak. The Apache seized his defiant stance, dismounted, approached, and shook hands. Although he did not disclose how he knew, Bell was convinced he was facing the Jicarilla band led by Chief Lobo Blanco, White Wolf, who likely orchestrated the cattle raid. The Apache he was conversing with attempted to deny this, instead blaming Chico Velasquez and his Mohawk Ute band for the theft. Bell was not deceived and threatened to capture Lobo and claim some Indian ponies as compensation. Interestingly, Bell noted that the Apache was willing to surrender Lobo, but not the ponies. During the unproductive negotiation, 2 elderly men berated the Jicarilla warriors, who had dismounted. Lobo's demeanor grew increasingly contemptuous, prompting Bell to command 2 of his men to dismount and force the Apache onto a horse. This tactic failed, and around 20 warriors let out a loud yell, forming a semicircle about 30 yards from the Dragoons, effectively outflanking the platoon on both sides. Lieutenant Bell commanded,
"Draw a pistol,"
and
"Forward."
just as Captain Skies unsuccessfully tried to persuade the Apache to avoid escalating the situation. Then came Bell's order to charge. The Indians skillfully sidestepped the charge and launched an attack from the rear. The Dragoons turned and charged once more. The Apache displayed remarkable agility and skill in evading being trampled, while they rapidly released their arrows almost from beneath the necks of the galloping cavalry horses. Eventually, they broke and retreated into the ravines and arroyos leading to the main Canadian. The Dragoons pursued them to the brink of the challenging terrain, but the fear of an ambush halted any further pursuit. Among the 5 Apache deaths was Chief Lobo, described by Lieutenant Bell as a, quote, cruel, daring, and treacherous chief. Bell did not take any personal credit for the death of the Indian leader. 2 troopers were lost during the skirmish. Private James Bell, not Lieutenant Bell, was killed by arrows, while Private W.A. Arnold succumbed to a spear thrust. Both were laid to rest on the battlefield. Additionally, 4 other troopers suffered severe gunshot wounds. Of the cavalry horses, 2 were killed and 2 were injured. Only 6 skinny ponies were captured from the Indians. After dispatching a message to Fort Union, Lieutenant Bell directed his troops toward the post. They journeyed until 3 a.m. on the 6th of March, when their guide lost his way. In the morning, at the crossing of the Canadian River, they received a message from the fort, informing them that a medical detachment would arrive shortly, with Surgeon John Byron. Still on their return march, on the morning of 7th of March, a man approached Bell and informed him that the Jicarilla had driven off around 200 head of government cattle on the Canadian about 24 hours prior. His life had been spared only because of the intervention of a band of the Ute, led by Chico Velasquez. The man then pointed to a hill several miles away, indicating that the Ute chief was behind it and wished to speak. Bell went in alone to meet the Indian, who arrived with 15 men. They informed the cavalrymen that 5 warriors had stayed with the remainder of the government herd to assist in driving it upriver, and the chief offered to help recover the stolen cattle. Although Bell did not comment on this unusual action by the Ute, Lieutenant Colonel Cook later referred to it as, quote, extraordinary. Some individuals believe that Chico Velasquez and his warriors were indeed involved in the raid and had deserted the Jicarilla when it suited them best. Upon hearing this, Governor Merriweather expressed skepticism, stating that he doubted Chico Velasquez would return any of the cattle. Instead, he expected the Jicarilla to survive on them in some secluded area throughout the summer. This, at least, would provide a temporary reprieve from their raids. The death of Lobo Blanco brought joy to many who believed he was the leader of the Apache responsible for the murder of a Santa Fe merchant named J.M. White and several others in 1849, as well as kidnapping Mrs. White, their daughter, and a black female servant, that he was responsible for the attack on a United States mail party at Santa Clara Springs in 1850. Christopher Carson, better known as Kit Carson, who oversaw the Taos Indian Agency for the Jicarilla, Ute, and other tribes, visited the nearby military installation at Candamet-Burgoyne on the 25th of March, 1854. During his visit, he held a council with 9 Jicarilla members, including 2 chiefs. They informed him that approximately 100 warriors and their families were camped close to the Picarillas Pueblo, where they were busy crafting earthen vessels, and that they had not participated in the raids occurring east of the mountains. Carson recognized the pressing need to secure provisions for these individuals and suggested that a special agent be appointed to reside among the Jicarilla. Carson's friendly demeanor towards the Jicarilla stood in stark contrast to his views on the Ute. Just days prior to his meeting at Candamet-Burgoyne, he expressed to Miss Survey that the Ute, quote, should be severely chastised and punished, and made to understand the power of the government. This remark reflected his belief that the Ute were exploiting the Jicarilla and were the masterminds behind the recent disturbances. The situation concerning the Jicarilla puzzled the acting governor. He was aware that game was scarce in their territory, and that they were hesitant to hunt there due to the troops in the vicinity being unable to, quote, distinguish the good from the bad. Hunting buffalo on the plains was challenging because of the hostility from the plains tribes. The trading opportunities for their earthenware were quite limited. He estimated that about a third of the Jicarilla had become estranged. To prevent those near Picarillas from joining the alienated group, they needed to be fed. The government's stingy policies made this nearly impossible. In preparation for potential conflicts with the Jicarilla, Brevet Brigadier General John Garland, the commander of the department, issued directives from Albuquerque to prepare and deploy the limited troops available to him. Additional members of the 1st Dragoons were dispatched to Fort Union under the command of 1st Lieutenant Samuel D. Sturgis and 2nd Lieutenant Isaiah N. Moore. Major George A. H. Blake of the 1st Dragoons, stationed at Candamet-Burgoyne, was ordered to collaborate with Lieutenant Colonel Cook on any mission, quote, against the Apache or other Indians. The ordnance officer at Fort Union was instructed to provide Cook with the necessary arms and ammunition required under the current demands of the service. These measures were implemented to counteract new Jicarilla hostilities and to ensure the mail routes remained operational. A somewhat fragile monthly mail service was upheld from Independence, Missouri to Fort Union in Santa Fe, facilitated by the men, mules, and wagons of Waldo, Hall, and Company. This and other routes received military escorts for the United States mail whenever the situation called for it. Meservy's remarks regarding the strength of the Jicarilla proved to be prophetic. On the 29th of March, he directed Kit Carson to return to Picarillas and assured the Jicarilla that, if he confirmed that they had not engaged in any hostile actions, they would receive a weekly supply of wheat or corn. But it was too late. Also on the 29th of March, Major George A. H. Blake received word that the Jicarilla had begun their westward movement through the Rio Pueblo Valley after breaking down their camp. Major Blake instructed 1st Lieutenant John W. Davidson to set out with Companies F and I of the 1st Dragoons, roughly 60 men, to track the Jicarilla and conduct reconnaissance. Davidson was cautioned against engaging the Jicarilla. On the night of the 29th, the troopers from Companies I and F, along with Assistant Surgeon David L. Magruder, departed from the cantonment. They headed south towards the Rio Pueblo before veering west towards Rio Penasco, following a trail that led them in the valley. Their journey took them across the mountains into the Caliente Canyon. As Davidson led his troops through the narrow passage of the canyon in a single-file formation, they became an easy target for an ambush. To mitigate this risk, Davidson dispatched a scouting party led by Corporal Richard Burns and 6 other troopers. At 8 in the morning on the 30th of March, Davidson received word that the Jicarilla camp had been located. Will Gornfield from History.net tells what happens next. Lieutenant Davidson's Dragoons mounted their horses and departed from their camp in Cieneguilla. The 60 men rode approximately a mile north, along the river on the Embudo Taos Trail before veering east into a narrow canyon. This canyon served as a speaker, as the sound of hundreds of iron-sawed hooves clattering against the rocky steambed, along with the loud rattling of weapons and horse gear, echoed off the canyon walls, reaching the ears of the Jicarilla encampment. As the first rays of sunshine began to warm them, the warriors readied their weapons and strategized to defend their village. The women, children, and elderly hurriedly gathered their belongings and fled south into the relative safety of the nearby woods and gullies. Leading the column was Corporal Richard Burns and his detachment of 6 men that had spotted the Jicarilla's camp situated on a ridge 100 feet above the canyon. As the troopers grew closer, chants and war cries echoed among the rocks. First Sergeant William Holbrook, a battle-hardened veteran who had faced the Comanches, Apaches, and Utes, heard these cries, turned in his saddle towards the men, and shouted, "Look out, men, that is a war whoop. We've got to fight." Davidson, who was positioned at the forefront of the main formation alongside his brother-in-law, Dr. David Magruder, raised his right hand high, signaling the troopers to halt. From the ridge came a bold challenge in English.
Come on up if you want to fight.
The gauntlet had been thrown down, and the lieutenant, a proud descendant of a Revolutionary War general from Virginia, accepted the challenge head-on. He threw Major Blake's caution to the wind and commanded his men to dismount and approach the village on foot, a decision that would prove to be a significant tactical error. The essence of mounted troops lie in their mobility, but you will see time and time again in the West, soldiers dismounting from their horses and losing their advantage. Davidson's assault unfolded as outlined in Poinset's 1841 Cavalry Manual. One trooper from a group of 4, known as the number 4, would remain mounted while the other dismounted troopers passed the reins over the horse's head, securing them to the halter of the horse on the right. This way, the mounted trooper maintained control over 3 horses belonging to the dismounted men and would escort these mounts to safety at the rear. Davidson organized the men into 3 platoons. A small group, including the number 4 horse holders and Dr. Magruder, were instructed to stay behind to protect the horses. Sergeant Holbrook led the right platoon, advancing up the wooden slope on the left flank of the village, and Sergeant William Kent commanded the second platoon moving uphill on the right flank. The 2 platoons engaged in action clumsily, making their way up the slope at a slow pace, as the men's smooth leather soles struggled for grip on the loose soil, uneven terrain, and vegetation. Upon reaching the top, Kent's platoon formed a line and charged left into the encampment. Gunfire erupted from the village, resulting in the sergeant's death, and the Dragoons responded with a sporadic volley that hit a few Jicarillas. Soon, the Dragoons had control of the camp, and the troopers began to pillage it. But this is what the Jicarillas wanted. From the base of the hill, cries could be heard indicating that the horse holders were under attack. The Jicarillas, employing the classic maneuver of Hannibal at the Battle of Cieneguilla in 216 BC, had lured their enemy forward, then maneuvered around the flanks to execute a double envelopment of the enemy's forces. When Davidson learned that the Jicarillas were positioned behind and trying to steal the horses, he had no option but to command his men to run back down the slope to assist the beleaguered detachment protecting the mounts. Davidson had selected a disadvantageous location for his defense. The soldiers were arranged in a low hollow in an elliptical skirmish line encircling the horses. Imagine essentially like a narrow sphere. Taking cover behind boulders and trees, the Dragoons fired their musketoons and pistols at elusive bands of warriors who would suddenly emerge from hiding, shoot arrows, and then vanish again. These assaults came from all directions, from rock to rock and tree to tree. Even more exasperating for the Dragoons was the lethal, quote, shower of arrows that fell upon them from elevated positions, far beyond the reach of their musketoons. Davidson's troops lacked confidence in their shoulder arms. Their Springfield Model 1847 musketoon, which fired a 69 caliber ball with an effective range of under 60 yards, was close to worthless in this engagement. Inspector General Joseph Mansfield noted that the musketoon offered, quote, no probable certainty of hitting the target aimed at, and the recoil is too severe to be fired comfortably. The intense struggle continued for approximately an hour and a half. Trooper Peter Weldon, a veteran of 3 years from Philadelphia, recounted feeling so exhausted from climbing, running, and fighting that he felt he could no longer stand. The troops found themselves encircled and disheartened, believing they faced a greater number of warriors. At this point in the battle, Dragoon casualties were relatively minimal when you think of the situation they were in, but their dwindling ammunition did not diminish their optimism of achieving victory. When Trooper James Strawbridge inquired to Holbrook if he should take the saddle off of his dying horse, the sergeant responded, quote, "Hold off until we defeat the Indians, then there will be time to remove the gear from the dead horses." A number of the troopers had been wounded, and 2 others now lay dead. With every casualty and lost horse, with every round spent, the Dragoons were diminishing in their capacity as a fighting force. A Dragoon typically carried around 30 to 40 rounds in a pouch-like cartridge box that was attached to his belt. In the heat of battle, 30 to 40 rounds could be depleted quickly, as panicked troopers firing at a fleeing enemy often wasted cartridges in chaotic, uncontrolled shooting. Then you add in the movement of battle, the troopers were prone to dropping a round or 2. Davidson consulted Holbrook, and they concluded that the Dragoons' position was rapidly becoming unsustainable. According to one report, during the council, a round from a rifle struck a tree having passed between them, and this was the final answer that was given. The lieutenant instructed his men,
"Mount and save yourselves."
The bugler brought forth the lieutenant's horse, and the command mounted up. Firing their Colt Dragoon revolvers and Aston horse pistols that were finding their mark, the detachment broke free from the smoke-filled area, splashed through the stream, and rode 150 yards up a steep embankment on the other side of the canyon. In their escape, however, they left 5 dead or dying soldiers behind. The Jicarillas did not seem to pursue the Dragoons, and for a time being, the battle seemed to have concluded. Halfway up the steep hill, Trooper George Greenwald of Company F, injured in the skirmish below, begged Davidson to not leave him. Davidson commanded stop so that the assistant surgeon Magruder could attend to Trooper Greenwald. The doctor was unable to halt the bleeding, and Greenwald succumbed to his injuries. With great effort, the column reached the ridge's summit. After traveling along the ridge for about 800 yards, the troopers turned right and ascended the hill along the trail of Cieneguilla. But the Jicarillas anticipated the lieutenant's movements and were well positioned to assault the battered command from all directions, as it attempted to descend southwesterly from the ridge. Holbrook assembled a dozen dismounted skirmishers to safeguard the column. Safely positioned beyond the reach of the musketoon fire, the Jicarillas unleashed volleys of arrows at the Dragoons, who outlined against the sky, becoming easy targets. Holbrook was hit in the shoulder by arrows, which Corporal Benjamin Dempsey quickly removed. Shortly after, the corporal was struck in the leg by a musket ball, resulting in a portion of his thumb being shot off. Despite this, he would survive. Unfortunately, Holbrook's time as an Indian fighter had run out as he was struck by 2 additional arrows, one of which was embedded so deeply that only the fletches were visible. The sergeant weakly exclaimed, quote, "I am shot and cannot continue on foot." Weak from significant blood loss, Holbrook pleaded with Trooper Strawbridge to bring his loyal horse. But as he tried to place his foot in the stirrup, the brave sergeant fell backward and died. Davidson rode up, showing remarkable courage as he tried to rally his exhausted and frightened men. When an arrow brought the lieutenant down, Corporal Burns rushed to him and removed the arrow as Burns was then struck by an arrow. With their ammunition running low, the troops frantically emptied the cartridge boxes of fallen comrades in search of cartridges. Trooper Weldon was hit in the right arm by an arrow and could only fire his pistol with his left hand. Trooper James Bennett was injured when a rifle ball penetrated the fleshy part of his left thigh and traveled upward, ending near the groin in the upper right thigh. He attempted to flee but fainted from intense pain and blood loss. When he regained consciousness, Bennett somehow managed to position himself between 2 horses and, gripping a stirrup in each hand, was dragged a half-mile to safety. With most of their horses gone, the remaining soldiers had no choice but to walk or share mounts. By late afternoon, they reached a relative safety at Cieneguilla. The Jicarillas, dealing with their own casualties, chose not to pursue the soldiers. The following day, officers and scouts examining the battlefield discovered that the retreat route was littered with the bodies of 17 men who had died while trying to escape. The Santa Fe Gazette reported that Chief Chacon informed the territorial governor, quote, "The Americans killed a chief, Pacheco, and a ball was cut out of the entrails of a woman who survived. A nephew of Lobo was also killed. About 50 Indians were killed at Cieneguilla." The Jicarillas successfully routed the U.S. Army Dragoons in a well-planned tactical engagement. Under the leadership of Fletcher's Rayada, roughly 100 to 130 Apache warriors confronted 60 Dragoons. While the exact number of Apache casualties remains uncertain, the Santa Fe Gazette reported that the number of 50 warriors, and the U.S. Army also estimated it to be up to the number of 50 warriors that were killed. The Dragoons suffered 22 dead and 23 wounded, along with a significant loss of horses. Davidson claims that members of the Ute tribe participated in the battle, but there is no evidence to support this assertion. An official report indicated the Davidson's force was unexpectedly attacked. But Kit Carson believed that Davidson had no choice but to order his men to dismount and charge up the mountainside. Both Brigadier General Garland and Kit Carson expressed high regard for Lieutenant Davidson, yet their comments reflect more of his bravery and gallantry than of his strategic judgment. Shockingly, a biographical account of Davidson claims he emerged victorious in the battle, although his command was nearly wiped out. Additionally, it is noteworthy that Kit Carson believed the Jicarillas were driven to war due to the military's behavior and actions in the Taos area. Will Gorenfield tells of the aftermath of the battle. Davidson would soon heal from his injuries and have a prosperous career as a general of volunteers in the Union Army. Following the war, he rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel in the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers, earning the nickname Blackjack. On the 20th of March, 1879, he was elevated to colonel of the 2nd Cavalry and was stationed at Fort Custer in Montana Territory. He passed away in St. Paul, Minnesota on the 26th of June, 1881, at the age of 57. Sergeant James Bennett deserted shortly after providing testimony at the Court of Inquiry. He evaded capture by making his way through the Mexican state of Chihuahua, eventually returning to New York, where he pursued a medical degree and later became an Army surgeon. Sergeant James Strawbridge continued to serve with the 1st Dragoons for another 6 years. In 1860, while assigned to Company B at Fort Tejon, he deserted. Corporal Burns, a tough Irish immigrant from New York, survived his injury at Cieneguilla, only to meet a fateful end as a colonel at the 1864 Battle of Cold Harbor. And finally, the Jicarillas. They demonstrated a remarkable tactical prowess and courage, resulting in a significant defeat for one of the U.S. Army's elite regiments. But as Mr. Gorenfield puts it, perhaps the Indians had won too well. On the 4th of April, 1854, a strong army column led by Lieutenant Colonel Philip St. George Cooke took to the field. Chief Chacon had retreated westward, hoping that the challenging landscapes of the Rio Caliente Canyon would shield his group from harm. On the 8th of April, Army scouts located the camp, prompting Cooke to launch an attack, seizing the pony herd, incinerating the village, and killing 5 warriors. Tragically, over a dozen women and children lost their lives while trying to escape through the snow. Witnessing the plight of the non-combatants, the hardened Colonel Cooke later expressed his sorrows, stating, "The tracks of bare and diminutive feet left a feeble memorial of their suffering." In a letter dated the 12th of April, 1854, to Acting Governor William S. Survey, Kit Carson voiced his strong discontent, asserting that the Jicarillas had been driven into war by the actions of officers and troops. Despite the conflict's injustices, Carson quickly offered his assistance to the Army. As you will hear in what I know will be a future series, Kit Carson was conflicted on this matter in many aspects of how to handle hostile native tribes. On the 4th of June, Carson served as a guide for a 1st Dragoon unit under Brevet Major James Carleton, which attacked and obliterated a Jicarilla camp near Raton Pass. The Army's relentless chase of the Jicarillas persisted well into 1855. Ultimately, the Jicarillas were forced off their lands and left in desolate groups struggling to survive. In 1883, the 2 Jicarilla bands, the Olaras and Lorenos, were relocated to the Mescalero Reservation, but they discovered that there was little good land left, prompting many to return to their former territory in the north. The government officially designated them a home in 1887, yet most of the land was unsuitable for agriculture. By the 1920s, a significant number of Jicarillas had shifted to sheep herding. In 1937, the tribe established a formal government and adopted a constitution, with the reservation headquarters being located in Dulce, New Mexico. According to the Jicarilla Apache Nation website, the Jicarilla Apache Indian Reservation covered 879,917 acres in the north-central regions of New Mexico. Situated in the upper areas of the San Juan River Basin and the Rio Chama, the reservation lies across the Continental Divide. Its northern edge meets the Colorado border, while the western limit is approximately 15 miles east of the Navajo Reservoir. Dulce serves as the only community within the reservation and hosts the tribal headquarters of the Jicarilla Apache Nation. As of the 2010 census, the nation's population was 3,254. I hope you all enjoyed our episode on the Battle of Cieneguilla. If you did, please leave a rating and review. It is an amazing way for this podcast to grow, and don't be afraid to share us with a friend, family member, enemy, your teacher, or a random person you just met. Thank you again for all your support. We will see you all next time. When in doubt, shoot straight, shoot fast. God bless.